Hello, thank you for joining me. This is Antecedent Based Interventions. Yes, please. I am Kimberly Howard with Kentucky Autism Training Center, and we'll spend the next little bit walking through this evidence-based practice. Here are our objectives today. You will leave with an understanding of what are antecedent-based interventions. You will leave with ideas on how you can get started and implement these interventions into your home. And you will leave with some resources to help you get started with antecedent-based interventions. Antecedent-based interventions are shown to be supportive across multiple age ranges, toddler age into adulthood, and across the following domains: self-help skills, behavior skills, communication skills, play skills, and social skills, making this a great evidence-based practice that you can use across multiple areas. Here are two websites that you can find additional information and resources related to antecedent-based interventions and other evidence-based practices. The Affirm modules and the Autism Internet modules are both great resources that you can check out when you have time. These are also additional websites that you can check out for further resources. Ocali.org has a wonderful resource center that you can find many visual supports that you can use for free. Vanderbilt, their evidence-based practices area is wonderful. All of these are great places that you can check out on your own for further resources and support in getting started with antecedent-based interventions and other evidence-based practices as well. I say antecedent-based interventions, yes please, because antecedent-based interventions are a set of strategies that make environmental changes that support the learner to hopefully engage in the activities that they need to do, whether that's at school or at home. This is a strategy that you can put into place before the child has any behavioral difficulties. And it's a set of strategies that supports the learner in doing the things that you need them to do. So it's a really great evidence-based practice to get started with. For me, if I can keep my child from engaging in difficult behavior, why wouldn't I want to do that? So for me, these are no-brainer strategies that are phenomenal to implement for many, many children. So here's how we would get started. And I'm going to walk you through all of these steps. So first, we're going to identify what is our interfering behavior, what's causing the student not to be able to complete their classwork or to complete their chores at home. We're going to collect a little bit of baseline data so that to support that interfering behavior. We know for sure that this is why this is happening. And then we're going to decide on which one of these antecedent-based interventions are appropriate. And many times we're layering them. So we're using multiple pieces of this antecedent-based intervention, and then we're going to implement it. In order to get started with antecedent-based interventions, we must start with why is this behavior happening? And we need to know for sure, not a guess. So let's talk about our ABCs of behavior. So the A is antecedent. What happens right before the behavior occurs? The B is a detailed description of the behavior. I need to know what the behavior is that you're talking about, even when I'm not there. And C is what's the consequence? What happened right after the behavior occurred? And I'll show you some examples of these next. It'll help it make more sense. Let's look at our ABCs of behavior. On the screen, you can see two different examples of some ABC data that someone has taken. So the top one, the child sees a desired toy. The child cries and screams for the toy. And then what is the consequence? We give them the toy. So the thing with ABC data is it helps us to figure out what is the child communicating by the behavior that they're exhibiting. And then once we figure out what that is, it can help us decide how to move forward. Other examples might be a child is asked to pick up toys. And so that's the antecedent part of that. The behavior is when the child was asked to pick up toys, then the child ignores that request and continues to play. And the consequence is the teacher says, okay, you can have 5 more minutes and then we're going to clean up. So unfortunately, sometimes the consequences that we evoke make it more likely that the child will continue to engage in the behavior. So let's look at some functions of behavior so that we can figure out what is our child trying to communicate to us. One of the things that antecedent-based interventions ask us to do is to listen for the message behind the behavior. So let's talk about some functions of behavior. Why might a problem behavior occur? So the first one, and it makes the acronym SEAT, S-E-A-T. So the first one is sensory. What is a sensory-based function of behavior? A sensory, it could be the need to fidget. It could be that things are too loud or too tight. It could be a sensory feeling inside of your body. What is escape? Escape is I need to get out of here right now. I need to leave this area. Attention-seeking behavior could be positive attention or negative attention. It's just I want your attention. And a tangible is anything that that you can get or give to the child. So it could be a sticker, an iPad, it could be access to their favorite toys. There's lots of options under tangible. And we're looking for these so that we can figure out what is the child trying to communicate. The other piece that sometimes that behavior tells us could be medical. I always add in an M with this for medical, because sometimes children engage in behavior for medical reasons. I recently had a student that we saw that had began biting. It was a very new behavior for them, and they had begun biting. And when we got permission from the parents to just take we implemented first a few different strategies, and none of them seemed to be very effective, and the behaviors seemed to be very randomized. And when we asked permission from mom to take a peek in his mouth, we found out that he had multiple cavities in his mouth. And if you've ever had a toothache and you can bite down on something, sometimes that might relieve the pain of it. And it seemed to be doing that for this particular child. So why is the behavior happening, and what's that behavior trying to tell us? And if we can figure out which function of the behavior is happening, then that will help direct which evidence-based practice or which part of antecedent-based interventions that we are going to implement. So it will help us I tell people we have to be behavior detectives. Antecedent-based interventions is a great strategy for becoming a behavior detective. This is a great resource of an ABC data collection sheet. I'm going to include this version into a Google Drive that you'll have access to at the end of this presentation. I like this one because it's quick. I can use checkboxes. There are multiple versions of an ABC data chart, and if you Google ABC data chart, many will come up. You can use whichever one works best for you and your setting. I personally like this one because it's a check all that apply. So I can very quickly use this to help me figure out my ABC data information. Under the A on this, a few of the boxes say things like difficult activity, changed or ended activity, uncomfortable environment, maybe it was too hot, too cold, maybe someone touched them, so it gives you things that might have happened. Under the B, it's a blank box so that you can clearly describe that behavior, plus it has information on intensity, how big of a behavior this was. Maybe it was really mild, or maybe it was very large and very disruptive. And then C is consequences. So under C, we have things like the child needed to sit. Maybe you gave them some attention. Maybe they needed help or comfort. Maybe you ignored them and you just ignored this behavior. What happened? How did the other children react? How did the adults react? This is the other side of this ABC data sheet, and it's the part that makes me like it so much. for our C, for our consequences, on the back side of this data collection sheet, it offers you the option of, is this you need to change the adult? Is this something that we need to change for the child? Or is this something that we need to change for the consequences? So for example, some of the options under Change You, it says use positive language. Tell the child what to do. Show the child when the activity is ending, or give them fair warning that the activity is about to end. Under Change Child, it says teach the child to pause and think. Teach the child a new skill with scripted story. Under Change Consequences, it offers the options of give them attention after they do the right thing. The child was offered a reward for correct behavior. So it gives you options of how can I support this child's behavior? How can we move forward to help this child make the correct choices? Or is this something that we need to help the adult to make some adjustments to? Do we need to modify and change the environment? Or do we need to look at our consequences? Maybe what we're doing is reinforcing this behavior for the child. So I really do like this ABC data sheet. There are many options out there that you can choose from if this one doesn't meet your needs. But just know I will add this to the Google Drive so that you have access to it. Let's get started talking about what are antecedent-based interventions. So one of the first things for antecedent-based interventions is setting clear, consistent behavioral expectations. And we're thinking about the needs of the learners when delivering those expectations. Maybe they need a visual support to help them remember what are the behavior expectations. And being consistent across people and across settings when possible is wonderful. The other piece is pairing the learning environment with reinforcement, making sure that good things happen wherever that child is at, and having a purposefully set schedule structure. So maybe on the weekend we have a general routine. So we start out with breakfast. We're going to hang out and watch some, I'm old school, Saturday morning cartoons. Maybe we are going to do something outside after lunch in the summer. We go outside, maybe we're taking a general walk, maybe we're playing in the yard, and then maybe we're coming back in and they're spending some time on an electronic device, and then maybe we're doing something else. But thinking about what is our set schedule structure. Decreasing or modifying the task. So in this, we are looking to see if the task is too long, or maybe it's a multi-step task. And so we are reducing the task to the level that the learner is able to complete it. Priming is another great example of an antecedent-based intervention. In priming, we're telling the learner the rules or the information that they need to know right now to complete the activity that we are about to start. So an example of priming is when my son played soccer. I would remind him before he would go out onto the field. I would say, remember, we don't touch the ball with our hands. We can only touch the ball with our feet or our head if you're going to headbutt it, right? In my classroom, I used priming to remind my students of the rules for the playground right before we went outside. So we had a rule that you could play only on the grassy area. Sorry, reverse that. You could only play where the wood chips are. In the grassy area, we could not play there. So right before we would go outside, and at the start of the school year, I would bring in a few pieces of wood chips and I would let the kids touch the wood chips, and I would say, guys, we only play where the wood chips are. And then we would go outside to the playground, and my students, we would walk the area of the playground that had the wood chips. And I would remind them, we're only playing where the wood chips are. We cannot play on the grass. There was unfortunately a safety issue inside of the grass. Behavior momentum is another great strategy that we can use. Behavior momentum means doing something easy or doing something that we know the learner can be successful at before we ask them to do something hard. Many times for students with disabilities, we're repeatedly asking them to do things that they are going to struggle to be successful with. So with behavior momentum, we're starting out with something that we know they're going to have success with. For example, If I'm going to work with, when I worked with a student on math, we were learning two-digit plus two-digit addition. This was a new skill for them. So I started out by practicing. I knew that they knew how to add 2 digits plus 1 digit. So I gave them a 2-digit plus 1-digit problem before I gave them the 2-digit plus 2-digit problem. So I started out with something that I knew the child knew how to do. And then we built on that success, and then we moved into the math that was going to be harder for them. And you can use this in all kinds of areas, but starting out with something that the learner knows how to do, and then that's behavioral momentum, and then priming is reminding them of the rules that they are going to use, or giving them the information that they need to know right now in this very minute, right before you do the activity. Both I have used at home and at school and found them to be highly successful. Another good antecedent-based intervention is placing specific demands. For example, saying sit versus saying sit down in your chair and show me you are ready to work. Or another example might be saying let's pick up your bedroom versus saying let's put the toys back in the toy box. Then let's put the Legos back into their basket. So being more specific when you're placing task demands can help clear up confusion that broader, more general directions can cause sometimes. So those specific demands can be really helpful so that your child and you know exactly what you're asking them to do. Another great antecedent-based intervention is offering choice. These are some examples of adult-controlled choices. So these are choices that you can offer that hopefully still help the child complete the task, but give them back some of the control. Reinforcers are a really powerful tool, so it's a great place to know. It's a great place to start with knowing what does your child like? What kinds of things might they be willing to work for? Reinforcers have a huge amount of research behind them and say these are things that you can utilize to get your kids to be more active participants. Other examples or just examples in general of reinforcers are stickers, iPad time, Legos. And then other places that we can offer choice, it might be choice of location. Where are they going to work at? Are you going to work at the kitchen table, or are you going to work on the swing on the front porch for completing their homework? Maybe it's a choice of, do you want to work with big sister or with mom on completing this homework? Do you want to use the yellow pencil, or do you want to use the purple pencil? So choice of what they're working for, their reinforcer, choice of the materials, so what color pencil they're using. Maybe it's a choice between markers or a pencil. Maybe it's a choice of the order of the task that you're doing. So if you have 3 things that you want to get done with your child this morning, and the order of it doesn't matter. Maybe you're letting them choose which one do they want to do first. Maybe it's a choice of who they're working with, mom or big sister, and then a choice of location, the front porch swing or the kitchen table. All of these give back some control to the child while still getting done the things that you need to get done. Another great antecedent-based intervention is establish routines. So create a routine. So many students struggle to follow verbal instructions. So when we talk, words disappear, right? So creating a routine probably that has some visual aspects to it, and I'm going to show you an example next, can help them understand what has happened at any given time. So if this is school-based, then you would spend first part of your school year teaching these routines, but we also have routines at home, and we're going to look at those next. So let's define what a routine is. So a routine is a sequence of events that are regularly followed. So what are common routines in your home? Some common routines that you might have, it could be a bedtime routine. So every night we take a bath, we brush our teeth, we read a bedtime story. Everybody kind of has a general flow of certain sequence of activities. You might also have a routine for leaving the house. Maybe it's feeding your pets. I live on a farm, so I have a routine for how I feed my chickens. We all have different types of routines. And they're just sequences of events that we do on a regular basis. I have a routine for how do I make dinner. Think about what the routines are at your house and how do those flow? Do those flow smoothly for you and your child? If they do, that is fabulous. If they don't flow smoothly, then you might need to think about adding some visual supports in to help your child, and you might need to look at the sequence of your routine and how can I teach these explicitly to my child so that they can be helped in remembering and understanding that sequence of events so it will flow more smoothly for all of us. Another great part or component of antecedent-based interventions is self-monitoring. So self-monitoring is teaching the child to become more aware of their behavior so that then they can become responsible for monitoring their own behavior. And typically you're using some sort of visual support, especially in the beginning. You can see on the screen it has a kind of a goal sheet for the day. It says, I will remember to put up my hand, to work quietly, to remain seated. This might be one version of self-monitoring. And the goal of this is that through that self-monitoring, then the children will respond to their behavior. Either they're going to, increase more desirable behavior or maybe decrease behavior that's not supporting them. So this is self-monitoring. To get started with self-monitoring, we need to pick a specific behavior or behaviors, and we need to be clear. Now in this example on the screen, the behaviors there are several behaviors. So it's listen to the teacher and follow along, it's clean up at the end and stay on task. They're asking them to do multiple. Typically in the beginning with self-monitoring, you're just going to pick one or two behaviors for the child to monitor. As the adult, you're going to take some baseline data, a little bit of information about how well are they doing that now on their own. And then you're going to teach your monitoring system to the student. And it could be like the example we saw on the previous page. It could be that exactly where it said, I will put my hand up, I will work quietly, I will remain seated. Typically we're asking the student to do pluses or minuses, something along those lines, something very simple that doesn't take up much time. And then you're going to practice with the child to help them get started with it, to make sure that they understand what you're asking them to do. And then after they've done it for a bit, you're going to kind of loop back and evaluate it. So the adult is going to come in and take a bit of baseline data again, not necessarily baseline data at this point, but just a new data point to see if this is effective or not for this child. Self-monitoring can be a great tool to use with a variety of students. And it's a nice skill because it's a lifelong skill. As adults, we self-monitor and self-correct ourselves all the time. So we're essentially handing that over to the child to give them more independence. In the next couple of slides, we're going to look at examples and options for self-monitoring, tools that you can use. So this is sort of a visual support that you can use for when I'm upset. The thing that makes this self-monitoring for kids is it gives them options. Everybody gets upset, right? It gives them options at the bottom. So at the bottom it says, when I'm upset, I can read, I can listen to music, I can rest on a pillow, I can do a puzzle, I can draw a picture. Now this specific visual support comes from File Folder Heaven. I think it costs $1 now. It used to be free. And I tell adults that maybe your child, I can read, is not calming for them, or they don't want to rest on a pillow. I tell adults that you can always chop those options off, cut those off of the page, and place the options that the student has when they are upset. Because a lot of times we spend a lot of our time telling kids what they can't do. You can't hit when you're mad. You cannot yell at me because you're mad. We need to tell them what can they do. So what can you do? I can go to my room by myself for a few minutes. I can say I'm mad, I'm upset. Maybe I can go listen to some music that's calming for me. Think about what are their options that they can do when they're upset. That's what I like about this visual support, is it kind of reminds us of that. And we're going to look at a couple more options. We are going to talk next about another option for self-monitoring. We're going to talk about the incredible 5-point scale. The 5-point scale breaks down behaviors and social skills so that they are more visual and makes them concrete. And a part of the goal of this is you give them options so that they can learn appropriate ways to respond and interact in many different life situations. And the way that this works is you can see the example on the screen is a 1 is green, color-coded green, and everything is great, and it goes all the way up the scale. So a 2, things are okay. A 3, I'm beginning to feel upset. A 4, I'm getting angry, and a 5, I'm headed towards out of control. And there are many different versions and options of what this might look like. Just a couple of tips before you get started. If possible, you want to create this with your child. And then you have to teach them how to use it and reinforce them using it. In the beginning, it's really great if adults model this for them and you set up times to practice, because it's easier in the beginning for them to see other people's emotions and feelings than it is for them to identify their own. So I tell people, encourage people, if you're watching a movie or they're watching a cartoon, you could look for what part of the scale is the character in the movie in. You know, maybe the character in the movie got upset, and so you could point that out and talk that through with your child. Maybe you're reading them a bedtime story and something happens in the story, and you could connect that back to this 5-point scale to give them some real life concrete examples of what this might look like for them. And another thing to note is if you're working with your child, they don't know numbers yet, that's totally fine. You can replace this with colors and shapes, and it's how come each of those numbers were already color coded for you. This is a book that you can buy, The Incredible 5-Point Scale. You don't necessarily have to have the book to get started, but some people really enjoy it. It's very inexpensive, I think around $20, $25, and you can probably find it used somewhere. It's been out for a while. They also have a really nice website that you can go to that has free downloadable 5-point scales that you can print out and you can modify and adjust to your own. So that's something that's really nice to know. So just know that those are out there. And you can also see on this current screen another example of a 5-point scale that they have used it for voice volume control. A 0 means no talking or a quiet voice, and a 5 would be a red voice, which is yelling, and that voice is for outside only. I know of a family that uses this version of the 5-point scale for when they go to church or other locations that voice volume is very important. So just a couple more examples, and I'm going to show you another example where they put in different options of things that your child can do to help calm themselves down when they are upset. This is the version of 5-point scale that I would recommend using, and it doesn't have to look exactly like this, but I really appreciate this version of the 5-point scale because it has the rating scale, the numbers, the 1 through 5, and it has an example of what your face might look like. And then in the middle, it has what it looks like. And then on the end, it has suggestions of what can your child do. So for example, if your child is at a number 3, the yellow number 3, they're feeling frustrated and disappointed. So what does that look like or feel like? It may look like maybe they're hungry, tired, or they might need to go to the bathroom, but they can't right at this moment. Something's broken, lost, or didn't work. So the last column says, I can try to, or an adult can help me. So I can try to use my words. Maybe I need to eat a snack, lay in a blanket, listen to music, ask for something else, make a different choice, and then earn points. This one is connected back to a point system the child is earning as reinforcer. Now this comes from the castleschoolnewsberry.org, and it's free and it's out there for you to use. And they also have a really lovely handout that is a couple of pages long that describes in detail how to adjust this version of it or how to make your own. So I really do like this. I also know there are some other examples if your child has a favorite superhero or book character series. I've seen Harry Potter versions of these. I've seen like Marvel superhero characters. I've seen several examples that might work well for a lot of different children, and so you can connect this back to something that is also their favorite. So this is another great example of a way that you might help your child to be able to calm their self down and self-monitor their own behavior. And remember, in the beginning, the adults are going to have to model this, and you're going to be looking for opportunities to model this. Even if you're making it up, maybe you make up an opportunity, you get mad and you're pretending to be mad, and you're using this chart and asking your child to help you calm down. That is a great way to get started with this. Last but not least in our collection of supports through antecedent-based interventions is visual supports. I can't say enough good things about visual supports. Visual supports is a great way to make communication more specific. Words disappear. And so when we are giving verbal directions or we're expecting our child to remember things that we told them, the words disappear. And if you already have issues with thinking and with your ability to quickly recall information, then that can make it much more of a challenge for students to follow directions or to remember sequences of tasks or everyday things. So on the screen, you're going to see a couple of examples of visual supports. In the top left corner, you're going to see a great example of just a written schedule. If your child reads, then that is fabulous. You can simply write things down because the written word hopefully won't disappear as easily as spoken words. In the top right corner, you're going to see these are good examples of behavior cue cards. So they say things like stop, hands down, feet on the floor, no talking. There are just a lot of words that we have to repeat, and you can find is a great free resource called Victories in Autism, and it's just the letter N. It's by a mom, I believe, out of Canada, and she has a lot of free resources that are school-based and home-based, and you just need to simply print them. So you have to have access to a printer, but she is a great free resource for a variety of visual supports. You also can see on the screen a visual support for washing your face and washing your hands. And there is also an object schedule for our students that maybe a picture card isn't enough and they aren't understanding what the pictures mean, but they need it to be actual objects. So visual supports are a fabulous place to start when we're trying to prevent any kind of interfering or problem behavior. They have a ton of research behind them, and they are a part of antecedent-based interventions, but they actually are their whole own category of an evidence-based practice for students with autism. So lots of research, and there are 1,000 different kinds of visual supports that you could possibly use. You just have to figure out what does your child need and what works best for your family. This is another great option for visual support, and I found this at the website that you see on the screen, and it was visual supports for home chores. It was sort of a checklist that was basically building both a routine. It's a combination of a routine and a visual support, which is fabulous for how do we clean our room, they had options for cleaning the room, they had options for a lot of different things that you might be doing at home. So something to check out and to see if they might work for you.
Thank you for watching this video. Please take a moment to complete this short feedback form by scanning the QR code or typing the URL into your web browser. Thank you.
So this is the end, and I really appreciate your time, and I hope that you have found this to be helpful and supportive. You can reach me if you have any questions. I am kimberly.howard@kedc.org, and the website for Kentucky Autism Training Center is listed at the bottom. So you can find me at both places if you should have any questions. I hope that you find these supports helpful and you are able to get started with them in your home. Have a great day. Thank you. Goodbye.